Welcome, everyone. Letting people join us, getting logged in. Welcome. Got a great crowd today. Well, as people are joining us, I do want to thank you all for joining us and welcome to what is now October for our Monarch Conservation webinar series. Today's webinar is Native Garden Design and Climate Resilient Landscaping. Our presenter today is Sara Ressing from Wild Ones. She's the Education and Program Coordinator. My name is Alyssa Taylor. I'm a program coordinator with the Monarch joint venture. I'm joined by my coworker, Jenna Tots, who is the online education manager. She'll be behind the scenes. So if you have any tech problems, we'll be here for you. And so before we get started today, uh, we begin by honoring the land on which we live and work. The offices of the Monarch Joint Venture are located in St. Paul and Belle Plaine, Minnesota, and we acknowledge that this land is the traditional homelands of the Dakota people, specifically the Mdewakanton Dakota, who have lived here for generations and continue to live here today. We recognize the enduring presence and contributions of the Dakota and Ojibwe nations across Minnesota. We want to thank our sponsors for their support on this webinar series. Our supporting sponsor is Reinvent Your Waste. We truly appreciate your support and dedication to monarch conservation. If anyone is interested, if you or your company is interested in sponsoring this year or next year, probably more into the next year space now, but please feel free to email learn@monarchjointventure.org. Jenna will put that into the chat for you all. A few reminders for Zoom before we get started. If you're joining us today, but you didn't pre-register, but you want to make sure that you get all of the follow-up information, please make sure to email learn@monarchjointventure.org with your name, city, and state, and then that way we can add you to that email list to make sure that you're receiving the follow-up emails from our presentation today. This webinar is recorded, so if you have to pop off early, what have you, don't worry, it'll be online as well as the massive archive of all of our monarch conservation webinar series. So that's nearly 10 years worth of monarch conservation webinars. So feel free to explore the topics there. Also during this webinar, you'll see the Q&A box. That's what we're going to be using to kind of collate our questions. That's typically found at the bottom of your screen. So you'll use that, add your questions into that, and we'll collect them for our speaker for the latter end of this session. The other thing that you can use that's likely down at the bottom of your screen as well is the reactions buttons. And the beauty about that is we can't see you, or you can see us, we can't see you, so we'd love to know that you're here. So feel free to use, oh, beautiful, use those reaction buttons as they're coming through to help interact with the speakers as well. If you don't see any of those things at the bottom of your screen, typically there's a circle with 3 dots in it. It says more. Click on that and you'll typically find either the reactions or that Q&A button to add to the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'm going to move along pretty quickly. A quick reminder as well, we do have translated captions if you need them. Those are also at the bottom of your screen. You could select any language you like other than English. And then just a reminder today as well, all of our webinar speakers represent their own viewpoints, which are not necessarily those of the Monarch joint venture. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sara Ressing. As a Wild Ones education and program coordinator, Sara develops and oversees educational strategies and programs that promote native plant landscaping. Since joining Wild Ones in 2023, Sara has spearheaded initiatives such as the Certified Native Habitat Program, created resources to enhance chapter success, and fostered collaboration through networking and partner organizations. Sara holds master's degrees in zoology and educational administration from Southern Illinois University. Her academic and professional journeys reflect a deep commitment to education and conservation. With a passion for ecological restoration and biodiversity, Sara integrates her background in zoology, educational leadership, and program development to inspire others to embrace native landscaping that supports pollinators, builds resilient ecosystems, and contributes to climate solutions. In this webinar, Sara brings her expertise to explore how Wild One's Native Garden Design Program empowers individuals to create sustainable, beautiful landscapes that provide critical habitat for pollinators and wildlife. And with that, Sarah, I'm going to turn it right on over to you.
Thank you so much. Excuse me, Alyssa, and that was quite the introduction. I have made a lot of promises there, and I hope I can live up to them. So let me share my screen here. So thank you again, Alyssa, and thank you to Monarch Joint Venture for inviting me to be a part of this series. I am so glad to be here. And I appreciate everyone that's in the audience today for taking the time to learn more about how native garden design can help us respond to what I think are two of the biggest challenges of our time: biodiversity loss and climate change. So I want to first begin by reframing how we think about our gardens. We often see them as decorative or personal spaces, but collectively, our gardens form one of the largest managed ecosystems in the country. Every front yard, every park, every campus lawn adds up to a vast landscape that can influence our soil health, water, and the climate itself. Doug Talmy has said that our goal should be to transition from landscapes that are only pretty to landscapes that are both pretty and ecologically productive. So that means designing for beauty and biodiversity at the same time. And ecological landscape design is this practice of making gardens that are both pleasing to the eye and functional parts of the ecosystem. Furthermore, our landscapes are a reflection of our values. They can either work against nature or they can help restore it. And as we'll see, hopefully, in the presentation I prepared today, the same design choices that support pollinators and monarchs are also making our landscapes better prepared for climate extremes. So biodiversity is the variety of life in a given system. We often think about biodiversity at the level of diversity with between species, so the number of species in a given ecosystem, but it also can be looked at through genetic diversity or through the diversity of an entire ecosystem. Our healthy landscapes depend on biodiversity at every single scale. Globally, biodiversity loss is accelerating faster than at any other time in human history. The World Wildlife Fund's Living Planet report found that global wildlife populations have declined by an average of 69% since 1970. And more than half of these declines are linked to changes in land use, or the conversion of natural ecosystems to urban or agricultural land. Across the US, we've lost 40 million acres of habitat in just the past 2 decades alone. Grasslands and prairies, which once covered the center of our continent, are now among the most imperiled ecosystems in North America. In Illinois, where I live, we've lost nearly all of our original prairie, with less than 0.01% of the original prairie remaining today. It's not very much. And the loss of native vegetation ripples upward through food webs and ecosystems. Insects that rely on native plants for food and reproduction decline, which then affect birds, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and people. As ecologist E.O. Wilson puts it, insects and other invertebrates are the little things that run our world. And when they disappear, so do the systems that sustain us, from pollination to soil formation. But the biodiversity crisis is not the only thing we're facing. It's tightly linked to climate change. These are not two separate problems, but two sides of the same coin. The same human activities that are destroying our habitat are also disrupting the planet's energy balance. And as we understand it today, the primary driver of climate change is the buildup of greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels, agriculture, and deforestation. These gases, of course, trap heat in the atmosphere and cause global temperatures to rise. Land use changes also add to the problem. When we replace native vegetation with pavement or lawn, we're removing nature's ability to store carbon and regulate temperature. There are lots of other factors that play roles here too. Airborne particulates can reflect or absorb sunlight. They alter local temperatures and local cloud formations. And as ice and snow melt, the Earth's reflectivity decreases. We have darker surfaces like asphalt and exposed soil absorbing more heat. And all of this sets off a positive feedback loop, with warming leading to more melting, which leads to more warming. We're all in about 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer than we were at pre-industrial levels, and the results are increasingly visible. We have more frequent droughts, heavier rainfall, longer wildfire seasons, and generally shifting weather patterns. All of these forces are amplified by the way we've designed our modern landscapes. Across North America, lawns and pavement dominate the built environment. And it might not surprise those of you here to know that turfgrass is the largest irrigated crop in the United States. Our lawns cover about 63,000 square miles, or an area larger than the state of Georgia. Maintaining this much lawn takes enormous resources. Each year, American homeowners use 9 billion gallons of water per day in the summer. We use about 20 million gallons of gasoline mowing our lawns, and we also apply around 70 million pounds of pesticides to our lawns each year. A typical lawn has compacted soil and roots that only reach 1 or 2 inches deep. This means that lawns shed most of the rain that fall on it. They send storm water into streets and storm drains instead of letting it soak into the ground. All of this runoff carries fertilizers, chemicals, and more into our local waterways, where it then contributes to nutrient pollution, algal blooms, degraded aquatic ecosystems, and so on. So even though our lawns might look green, they function more like pavement than living ecosystems. They are resource intensive, they are biologically sterile. Lawns, I think, symbolize our separation from nature. They are landscapes that are built for control and not connection. And I think that lawns reveal how far we've drifted from living within our natural ecosystem. And that all sounds really discouraging, but the story doesn't end here. Haven't you heard? The era of the American lawn is over. Wild Ones believes that we have all of the tools that we need to help slow biodiversity loss and lessen the impacts of climate change simply by rethinking how we design our outdoor spaces. Native plants are those that have evolved within specific regions, adapting over millions of years to local soils, climate patterns, and wildlife. Native plants form the foundation of biodiversity by supporting insects, birds, and other species that depend on them. These long-term ecological relationships have also made native plants naturally resilient to local stressors like drought, flood, and fire, those same challenges that are now intensifying under climate change. So when we think about climate solutions, we're usually picturing technology, solar panels, electric cars, concrete stormwater basins, you name it. But native plants are quietly performing many of the same services we've been spending millions of dollars building into our cities. First, native plants have roots that form dense interlocking networks that can anchor soil, even during heavy rains. Soil stabilization goes far beyond the prairie roots we typically talk about. We have upland trees that are anchoring slopes with their woody roots, preventing landslides, wetland plants knitting together loose soils and floodplains, and shrubs binding thin rocky soils where turf often fails. We also have native ground covers like wild strawberry or frog fruit that create living mulch, protecting our bare soils and supporting soil organisms year-round. Secondly, native plants do act like living stormwater systems. In prairies, those deep-rooted grasses absorb rainfall and let it soak in. In forests, our layered canopies intercept up to a quarter of incoming rain before it even reaches the ground. In wetlands and riparian areas, sedges and shrubs slow floodwaters and filter sediment. And even coastal plantings trap silt and buffer storm surges. So wherever they grow, native plant communities move, hold, and clean water naturally, reducing runoff and protecting our water quality. Across ecosystems, native vegetation also stores carbon and moderates heat. Forests and savannas can store carbon in their wood and leaf litter. Grasslands and shrublands store it below ground. And wetlands can hold enormous amounts of carbon in their saturated soils. And in cities, our trees and shrubs can shade the pavement and lower air temperatures, while meadow plantings can cool the air through evapotranspiration. Each plant community contributes differently depending on its habitat, but together they balance local climates. And finally, and closest to my heart, is that native landscapes can rebuild ecological links across our fragmented environments. A single oak can host over 500 species of caterpillars, while other keystone species like asters and goldenrod can feed pollinators all the way through fall. We also have coastal shrubs that shelter birds, and my favorite example of desert yuccas that support very specific moth pollinators that are adapted to their blooms. When we present these native species across our neighborhoods and in our gardens, they're creating corridors or living networks that allow wildlife to move, feed, and reproduce, even in urban and suburban settings. So when I like to talk about native plants as climate solutions, this is what I mean. They're conserving water, they're filtering pollutants, reducing flooding, cooling the air, they're locking carbon underground, and they're supporting these resilient biodiverse systems, doing the work of engineered infrastructure, but powered by biology instead of concrete. Now, more specifically, biologically native plants are climate resilient because they've evolved within the natural rhythms and extremes of their region. Let's just take a look at a couple of specifics here. Native plants, as I keep saying, have evolved under local pressures. So these temperature swings, droughts, fire, flood, frost, all of their genetics encode these wide tolerance ranges. Populations of native plants often include regional ecotypes that are adapted to local conditions. So for example, common milkweed has a wide geographic range in the United States, but the northern and southern populations bloom and grow at different times. This genetic variation helps populations adjust gradually to shifting climates. Next, many native perennials store their energy in roots, rhizomes, or bulbs, enabling quick regrowth after fire, drought, grazing, other stressors. The flexible timing of leafing and flowering in native plants help them track unpredictable seasons. And deep or diverse root systems, whether in prairies, forests, or wetlands, can maintain access to moisture and nutrients. So I guess the example here would be this roots diagram to the left. And some highlights here are that the average root system of prairie dock is between 12 and 14 feet deep. And the big blue stem often grows extensive root systems that typically reach between 5 and 8, but pictured here, they can penetrate up to 12 feet. Physiologically, native plants also offer seasonal dormancy, which is another advantage, protecting the tissues from temperature extremes. And below the surface, partnerships with mycorrhizal fungi, nitrogen-fixing bacteria, improve nutrient exchange and water uptake, further enhancing resilience under stress. Now, third, native plant communities are functionally diverse. When one species declines, others will move in and fill its ecological role. They support trophic resilience by sustaining pollinators and food webs, allowing faster recovery after disturbance. The layered structures of our native plant communities, ground cover, canopy, creates microclimates that buffer heat and hold in moisture as well. And finally, because native plant ecosystems have, again, evolved under these cycles of natural disruption, their species are pre-adapted to recover from stress through traits like resprouting, heat-resistant seeds, and flexible life cycles. Together, all of these adaptations make native plants inherently capable of recovery and renewal, even under increasing climate stress. So what's remarkable is kind of everything we've talked about, biodiversity, climate resilience, and native plants as infrastructure, traces back to the idea that started the native plant movement to begin with. In the 1960s and 70s, Lori Otto, pictured here, was already sounding the alarm about habitat loss, chemical lawn culture, and the disappearance of our native landscapes. What we call now climate resilience is what Lori Otto simply called working with nature. She understood that when we strip away diverse native vegetation and replace it with turf and pavement, we are breaking the natural systems that manage water, store carbon, and support life. Lori Otto was a prominent Wisconsin environmentalist, a contemporary of Rachel Carson, and she's widely considered the godmother of the natural landscaping movement. Notably, her advocacy against DDT led to its first statewide ban in Wisconsin in 1967, and then she was instrumental in banning DDT nationwide in 1972. And we love Lori Otto here at Wild Ones because she was the inspiration of our founding members. After attending a talk that Lori Otto gave up in Wisconsin, a group of 9 people started our Wild Ones in 1979 with this simple but revolutionary idea: ordinary people can change the environment 1 yard at a time. And so Lori's famously quoted here: if suburbia were landscaped with meadows, prairies, thickets, forests, or combinations of these, then the water would sparkle, fish would be good to eat again, birds would sing, and human spirits would soar. Lori's vision didn't end with this quote. It's become the foundation of a national movement to reconnect people and place through native plants. And today, Wild Ones has more than 135 local chapters across the country. We have tens of thousands of members, and our chapters are where change truly happens. Through hands-on education, native plant sales, garden tours, youth programs, and local advocacy, we're working to help shift community norms around landscaping. Together, Wild Ones promotes native landscapes through education, advocacy, and collaborative action. So if you're not a Wild One member, I hope that this presentation today will inspire you to join us in helping native plants and natural landscapes thrive in every community. Locally and nationally, Wild One's goal is to give you the tools and education and support to start your native plant journey. Our native garden design program began in 2020 under the premise that ecologically productive landscapes can also be beautiful. That should be familiar by now. The program features professionally created, region-specific, full yard native garden designs that are free to download. Each plan includes a site layout, plant lists, installation guidance, along with lots of information about bloom succession, preparation, maintenance, and even more. And the foundation of this program is this growing library of digital resources designed to help you get started with confidence. The inspirational design plans are paired with click-through getting started guides, embedded videos, meet the designers, and even more. We also offer interactive lookup tools that help users identify their ecoregion and find native plant nurseries. Because we all know that the most successful gardens start with regionally adapted native plant species, we're working to fill that need. And moving right along, here are a few, just a couple of these key design principles that guide our native garden design program and ecological landscaping as a whole. Most importantly is how we select and arrange plants on the landscape. It determines not only how these landscapes function, but how they are perceived. Design is what makes a native garden look intentional, perform its ecosystem services, and gain acceptance into our neighborhoods. We'll cover a lot of these as we move through the other content today, but I wanted to highlight 3 now that I think are probably most important. The first is function before form. Function in landscape design is about how well a space works for its intended use, while form is about its visual and emotional impact. A successful native garden begins by asking, how will this space contribute to the environment or solve a problem? Will it manage water? Will it offer privacy, slow wind, or support wildlife? Your garden's mission statement. And once those systems are in place, form follows naturally through native plant structure, selection, texture, seasonal color. Secondly, right plant, right place, which honestly could be first too here, is really the foundation of every successful native garden. Understanding your site, its sunlight, soil types, drainage, moisture levels is the very, very first step to gardening. The best result comes from selecting plants that are going to naturally thrive under the conditions you have in your yard. And whenever possible, sourcing local genotype plants is the best choice. These are plants that are grown from seed collected within your local ecoregion. And finally, connecting people and native plants is foundational to what we do at Wild Ones, but it is our gardens that are actually doing the work. Native gardens are spaces where people feel part of the ecosystem, not separate from it. And connecting people in place is one of those key design principles I just had up. Today, we've published over 25 professional native garden designs that represent more than 20 US ecoregions, and they're organized into cities, as you can see here. Each of our native garden designs fosters a distinct sense of place. They reference local ecology and climate while integrating green infrastructure to address those site-specific needs. These native garden designs are, again, designed to work with nature, not against it, and they're not just gardens. These are living examples of climate resilient design. Before we get too far along, I'd be remiss in not talking about not just what we plant, but how we care for what we've planted. The way we maintain our landscapes determine whether they keep storing carbon, managing water, or supporting biodiversity, or whether they quietly undo that progress. So let's talk a little bit about maintenance. Starting with the soil, when we turn or till it, we're exposing soil stored carbon. When we turn or till our soil, we're exposing stored carbon to oxygen, releasing it back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. But carbon isn't the only reason to let our soils rest. Undisturbed soil holds water better, it resists erosion, and it keeps nutrients in place during heavy rain. It also prevents the living fungal and microbial networks that help plants share water and nutrients, the foundation of our resilient ecosystems. Permanent native plantings mimic no-till systems. They keep roots in place year-round, and they feed soil life, so carbon is stored safely underground. The next key part of our maintenance is that we need to leave our leaves. What others might send out as yard waste is actually one of the most powerful soil builders we have. Fallen leaves and stems create natural mulch that can feed soil microbes and fungi responsible for storing up to 75% of our underground carbon. This layer also keeps soil moist, it buffers temperature extremes, and it provides shelter for overwintering insects, including solitary native bees that nest in the hollow stems of our plants. If you clean up too early before temperatures consistently reach around 50 degrees, you risk removing the next generation of pollinators before they can even emerge. And next, water management is another key part of climate smart maintenance. In every ecosystem, native plants are adapted to local rainfall patterns. And across regions, replacing conventional turf with native landscaping can cut outdoor water use by as much as 30%. Dense plantings also slow runoff, reducing erosion and flooding downstream. And finally, and most importantly, we need to avoid pesticides, fertilizers, and other lawn chemicals whenever possible. These products disrupt the living networks in our ecosystems. Fertilizers, for example, accelerate microbial respiration, which also releases CO2, while pesticides and herbicides, of course, kill the very insects, plants, and microorganisms that are keeping our ecosystems balanced. Furthermore, manufacturing and runoff pollution make pesticides, herbicides, and other lawn chemicals a triple threat. They hurt soil, they hurt waterways, they hurt the climate, and they hurt people too. So maintenance really is climate action in disguise. When we let the soil rest, we leave the leaves, we conserve water, and we skip chemicals, we're working with natural processes instead of against them. Every small action here is compounded over time. The garden becomes more self-sustaining, the soil more alive, and our landscapes more resilient. So by now you've probably thought, I forgot I was giving a talk to the Monarch Conservation webinar series, but I didn't. There's a picture of a monarch. Everything we've talked about so far, soil health, maintenance, climate resilience, all of this directly supports pollinators, wildlife, and of course, monarchs. All of you know here that monarchs are these charismatic indicator species. They capture our attention because they are beautiful and they are familiar, but they also tell a larger story about the health of our ecosystem. Monarchs depend entirely on native milkweed species for their larvae and on a steady supply of nectar plants to fuel their long migrations across North America. But over the past 2 decades, their numbers have dropped dramatically. The eastern population has declined by roughly 80% since the 1990s, and the western population has fallen even more steeply. Climate stress amplifies these losses. Temperature extremes disrupt breeding. Severe droughts and storms destroy milkweed and nectar sources, and shifting bloom times can leave migrating monarchs without the food when they need it most. So when we talk about building climate resilient landscapes, we're also talking about monarch conservation. The same solutions apply to both, restoring native, diverse, and connective plant communities that can adapt to a changing climate and can sustain life across generations. So when we design for monarchs, we're designing for every stage of their lives, from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly. Each stage depends on something slightly different: milkweed for larvae, shelter for pupation, and continuous nectar sources for adult butterflies. What's powerful about this, again, is that those same strategies that can support monarchs, these, and I'll get to them soon, but regional plant palettes, bloom succession, reduced chemical use, connected habitats, are those same strategies, again, that make our landscapes more resilient to climate extremes. So in caring for this one single species, we're actually strengthening the systems that sustain many others: pollinators, birds, soil organisms, everything beneath our feet. So one of the most interesting aspects of monarch biology is their migration patterns. Monarchs need habitat continuity against this entire migratory route from Mexico to Canada. Connected native gardens can serve as stepping stones along their monarchs' migratory corridors. They offer food, refuge, as these insects travel thousands of miles each year. Monarchs depend on sequential blooming, from Texas milkweed to Midwest asters in October. A single migrating monarch may rely on thousands of individual backyard gardens for nectar refueling. So each yard that includes milkweed and nectar-rich flowers can contribute to that continental scale recovery effort. So here are 5 key principles that can guide monarch-friendly garden design. And the first is regional continuity. As we just saw, monarchs rely on native milkweed for their larvae and nectar-rich flowers for migration. And so using plants that are native to your ecoregion ensures that monarchs find what they need and what they expect at every stop along their route. Each ecoregion plays a part in that continental migratory chain. If one link is missing, the whole system weakens. Second, bloom succession. Monarchs migrate thousands of miles and they need nectar the entire way. A resilient garden will include flowers that bloom in sequence, early, mid, and late season, so that there's always a food source available. Across much of the US, That might be phlox and penstemon in the spring, milkweed and coneflowers in the summer, and goldenrod and asters in the fall. And third, dense native planting isn't just beautiful, it is protection. A thick canopy of vegetation buffers extreme heat, wind, and rain, and it creates microclimates where butterflies can rest and recover, and their larvae can develop. Fourth, and I'm going to keep saying this because it's so important, but avoiding pesticides and herbicides is essential for protecting monarchs. Even traces of systemic insecticides can harm monarch caterpillars and the native bees that share their habitat. Healthy, balanced native gardens rarely need chemical intervention. And fifth, community participation. One garden helps, but connected gardens create real change. When we link our habitats across yards, schools, parks, and rights of way, we form continuous corridors for monarch migrations. Each local planting can become part of a larger climate resilient network that supports monarchs across their full range. So that was quick, but we talked a lot about design principles that guide monarch conservation, but I would like to spend a few minutes looking at how these ideas come to life in some of our native garden designs. Our first example comes from our Indianapolis native garden design created by Sara Gray and Coralie Palmer through the Indiana Native Plant Society. So bloom succession is built into this health strip planting, which you can see along the top of the slide here. We have sand fox, which provides early nectar in spring, stiff coreopsis that can carry our garden through early summer, and butterfly weed that supports both caterpillars and adults in midsummer. Finally, we have some rough blazing star, which can extend the bloom time into late summer and fall, right when the monarchs are migrating and need it most. The design also uses layering and density to balance function and beauty. Prairie drop seed forms a fine textured low layer that can cool the soil and provides shelter for insects, as well as softening the edges of the design itself, and mid-height perennials fill in the middle section. We also have blazing star, of course, that adds a lot of visual height and height and visual rhythm. The dense planting here reduces weeds, stabilizes temperatures and moisture, as well as it creates these microclimates where butterflies can rest and develop safely. Every species here, which is not very many for this design, serves both an ecological role and an aesthetic one. And together, I think that these choices offer a model for how we can translate prairie structure into an urban form, even in a space as small as a 4-foot wide curbside strip. Our second example comes from Lafayette, Louisiana, designed by Donner Weifenbach. This plan represents the Western Gulf Coastal Plain ecoregion. It's a region that plays a very vital role as the southern stopover point for migrating monarchs. Many monarchs that breed in the Midwest and Eastern United States also pass through or near Louisiana on their way from Mexico, making gardens like this an essential link in the migratory train. This design focuses on regional continuity by using coastal and wetland species adapted to Louisiana's heavy rainfall, flooding, and high humidity, as well as heat. The design also uses foreground to background layering that mimic a natural wetland edge. For this design in the foreground, we see swamp sunflower and aquatic milkweed anchoring the planting, and behind them, prairie blazing star again adds vertical structure. And then we have, as well as late season nectar, and then we also have a variety of larger native shrubs that are forming a backdrop that frames the planting in general. This is a fairly diverse planting, but the species highlighted here are plants that emphasize bloom succession and habitat density. And our third example shows how native garden design can integrate with more formal spaces, even edible landscapes. This design is from Princeton, New Jersey, and it demonstrates how native plants can, again, bring in ecological function into a structured, productive garden layout. So this design uses just 11 native plant species, and shown here are a few that define its structure and seasonal rhythm. Early bloomers like Virginia strawberry, raspberry, and blackberry run along the north side of the planting. And then we also have blueberry that is flanking the borders and the sides. Within the planting, we have milkweeds, 2 different kinds that offer mid-season blooms and serve as a host plant for monarchs. And then we also have late flowers here like blue vervain and smooth blue aster that keep the garden active well into fall. So here you can see how ecological design meets everyday use. The planting beds are symmetrical with defined edges and a clear central gathering space, inviting people to enjoy the environment. But they're also filled with native and edible species that support both people and wildlife. So what I think is powerful about these three examples is how easy they are to replicate. I was so inspired by the utility and simplicity of the 5-plant health strip from that Indianapolis design that I replicated part of it around my mailbox this past fall. I promise I put those in the ground. Each one of these Wild Ones native garden designs is meant to be a starting point. So download them, scale them to your space, and create a piece of this habitat in your own yard, in your own school, in your own community garden. And then I want to follow up by saying that what's even more exciting here is that these small actions add up. This is just one bed in my yard. I'm adding more, right? And so is my neighbor. And I think that even a small, well-designed garden can deliver big ecological benefits. In fact, when about 70% of a garden's biomass is native, it can support bird reproduction at the same rates as seen in nearby natural areas. And that's because native plants host the caterpillars and insects that birds rely on to raise their young. Roughly 96% of terrestrial bird species in North America feed insects to their young. So in the, I think, highly cited example by Doug Tallamy's work is that a single clutch of chickadees requires 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to fledge. This is an ecosystem service that non-native landscapes just rarely provide. So for example, native oak trees, as we said before, support over 500 species of caterpillars in the US. That's more than any other tree genus we've studied. In comparison, most common ornamental trees like ginkgo or crepe myrtle, Bradford pear, support fewer than 10 species. And the benefits of native plants extend far beyond birds. Research consistently shows that native plantings boost pollinator abundance by roughly 40% and can support up to 4 times more native bee species than traditional gardens. Even increasing native floral cover by just 10% within an urban landscape can double the abundance of some wild bee species. And scale matters. Relatively small patches, so less than 5,000 square feet, can make a difference when they're distributed across neighborhoods. These many small islands of habitat have been found to be more effective collectively than one larger patch. And this is because they reduce the distance that insects need to travel between food sources. And from a climate standpoint, these impacts add up quickly. A native garden sized around 4,000 square feet can sequester 1 to 2 tons of carbon each year. So when we start to see our gardens as not these isolated spaces, but as part of a connected network, as part of an ecosystem, their impact multiplies. Together, native gardens create a living web of climate resilience that can stretch across communities and along migratory routes like the monarchs. So every native garden is a node in a living network. It's part of something bigger. Every garden becomes a place where ecology and community can meet. We've talked a lot about the ecosystem services that native landscapes provide, but they also bring neighbors together. They create learning spaces for children, and they offer beauty that changes the way that people see nature. That's what Wild Ones is all about. Our vision is native plants and natural landscapes thriving in every community. And we improve the environment through local chapters and hands-on education. And we're working to rebuild these relationships between people and the places that they live. And the science supports this. Research consistently shows that biodiverse landscapes spark social connection. People who garden with native plants tend to talk more with their neighbors. They spend more time outside, and they report a stronger sense of satisfaction with their surroundings. And when wildlife becomes visible, butterflies, bees, and birds, it draws people in. It gives them something to share, to point out, to talk about. And it's not just even about seeing nature, it is about engaging with it. Homeowners who create pollinator habitat often describe feeling more connected to their community and more responsible for the land around them. Neighborhoods with visible biodiversity also tend to develop stronger senses of identity. And that's because these gardens, they become places of curiosity, conversation, and pride. We see this reflected in our chapter's work too. For example, members of the Wild Ones Madison chapter in Wisconsin have helped shift public perception through neighborhood garden tours, choose to care signage, and local advocacy around native landscaping ordinances. The efforts of this chapter have opened conversations among many neighbors and transforming what we might once have been seen as messy yards into visible symbols of care, knowledge, and connection. And as a member once said, and I wrote this down, but I don't remember where, when, or who said it, is when neighbors stop to ask you about your plans, that's when changes starts happening. And so those small daily conversations, a passerby noticing a monarch or a yard sign, are what transform awareness into action. Native gardens don't just restore ecosystems, they restore relationships. They create spaces where people share curiosity, they learn from one another, and they rediscover that our health, our communities, and our environment are all deeply connected. So as we wrap up, I want to bring this full circle, right? Everything we've discussed here, biodiversity, climate resilience, and design, points to one simple truth. What we do in our own yards matter. So start small. None of us need to start by rewilding our entire properties at once. Even a few square feet of native plantings or a keystone plant in a container on your patio can make a measurable difference for pollinators and for wildlife, especially when multiplied across a neighborhood, a region, or a nation. And of course, plant local, choosing native plants that are adapted to your ecoregion, and whenever possible, buying from local growers who use local seed sources. These plants will be hardier, they'll require less maintenance, and they will better support the insects and birds that evolve alongside of them. Next, we need to care differently about our landscapes. The way you maintain a garden, regardless of whether it's 100% native or ornamental, determines its impact. Avoid fertilizers and pesticides, which harm soil life, pollinators, and even people, and leave the leaves and let the stems stand through winter. These are all homes for next year's bees and pollinators. And finally, share what you learn. Talk to your neighbors, your local plant nursery, your child's school, your church. Every conversation helps this movement grow. And if you want to help this movement grow, consider connecting with a Wild Ones chapter near you. Our chapters are those local hubs of education and action. They are places to learn about native plants, get help with sourcing native plants, and meeting others that care about the same things you do. Visit wildones.org/near-me to find a local chapter. Together, Wild Ones members are turning thousands of yards, parks, and community spaces into connected, climate-resilient habitat. That's what makes this movement powerful. It's local, it's tangible, and it's growing one native plant at a time. So I'll close by saying thank you to Monarch Joint Venture, and of course to everyone who is joining me today for this, and especially for the work that you're already doing.
Thank you, Sarah, for taking the time. Lots of little reactions coming in. So thank you all for sharing those with us. I do want to take some time to have some questions. Remember, if you have questions, to make sure that you put them in the Q&A, or do your best to put them in the Q&A and not the chat so that we could keep track of them better. So we'll do our best. You can continue to ask questions throughout this time frame. Whatever we don't get to today, we will be connecting with Sarah afterwards to try and get some answers to your questions, or things that we might not have the perfect answer to today. You know, we can get you some resources for. So to kick us off, I'm gonna kick you off with a fairly easy one, and it's, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint slides?
Sure, if you like them that much. Yeah, I can arrange to make sure Alyssa gets a copy of them.
I will also tell you that Sarah has put together, just from her slide deck, and she's already sent it to us, a fantastic list of resources with links for all the stuff that she's talked about, as well as resources in terms of references and things of that nature as well. So if you're just looking to get the info without, you know, needing the whole slide deck, she's already put all that stuff together for you. So she's knocked that off of the list already. So keep an eye out for that when we send the follow-up email as well. Is Wild Ones looking at publishing resources specifically for attracting moths, or maybe a bat-friendly garden?
No, I love that idea. Yeah, honestly, Wild Ones publishes resources across the country on a variety of topics, and I can't even keep up with it. So yeah, there's a ton of great resources out there about, yeah, attracting moths, attracting bats specifically, I think we just it's coming up in the fall journal, which I think came out in September. Yeah, we had a great article in the Wild Ones Journal in the fall, which did talk about gardening, like night gardening, and so that kind of encompasses how to garden for moths and bats and things like that. But certainly, yeah, I can look for more additional resources and kind of share those with Alyssa to share out.
Awesome. This is a good question. Just wondering how Wild Ones is connecting with residential developers who are planting development landscapes with invasive species. Is there anything that we can do to stop this?
Certainly that's a really important advocacy step, and I think a lot of our chapters are doing some of that work. I mean, on the positive side of things, there are now like a lot of HOAs and developments that are becoming like 100% native. There's one that comes to mind out in Florida where our seedling recently launched, and I think there's another one in the upper Midwest somewhere where I can't quite remember. But yeah, so like tides are changing. We do have kind of these developers that are more eco-conscious and ethical, and so they are kind of planting full on native landscapes for these developments. But yeah, the issue still persists that like throwing in these, spending money on turf grass, spending money on burning bush, these, just not great choices for landscaping nowadays, is definitely worth, making a call to your local, developer or sending an email. And so, yeah, we do have some of our chapters are doing that work and we are supporting that nationally because it's an important issue.
Awesome. And kind of, I guess this one kind of follows up with that. This is somebody that is a landscape manager in Northeast Oklahoma wanting to learn how to work in native plants into design plans for garden beds at city buildings and parks. Dealing with pushback that native plants don't look clean or manicured enough in more formal beds. So if there's any recommendations for native plant focused design programs that they could attend to learn more about landscaping with native plants. So any
Absolutely.
resources, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, this website, the nativegardendesigns.wildones.org, is really a hub for those sort of resources. Um, and then I think, yeah, we have additional resources on the menu page, and one of those things is member gardens. And so we've gone through and profiled certain member gardens, and a lot of those have photos. So I think when it comes to convincing others that native plants are not messy, it really comes down to proof. And so yeah, so peruse some of those resources and feel free to take some of those pictures and bring them over. Or yeah, show them this presentation, right? But I didn't put enough landscape photos in here, so I think that you probably could make something separate. But
Like yeah, these are great questions that are coming in. Sarah, is there a rule for planting native plants in groupings? Like how many native plants need to be planted to get started?
oh man, that is a fantastic technical question. I mean, aesthetically, right, you're always looking at drifts of like 3 to 5, but I guess research shows that anything under 30% native plant species, like infiltration, if you're going to do a garden, if it doesn't have at least 30% native plants, like the ecosystem services go way down. And so I guess I'm not quite answering your question as if there's a specific number. Like my philosophy is to cram as much as I can into, a given bed. But no, like I want to say I got to go back to that slide, but there's a stat in there somewhere, and I think it's in the handout I made, which is basically like even gardens that are like several hundred square feet. So like, just pretty small. Like think of a 25 by 25 foot plot, for example, have an ecological impact. So the scale, what we're seeing as the research, because this is a lot of newer research, comes out is that the scale really doesn't matter, right? Like, so even like I have asters and planters on my patio here, and we see just a ton of pollinators on them. So even just one plant is a good start because it's the adage, if you plant it, they will come. So yeah, so it's not a checklist, when it comes to native planting. It's a lot about experience, feeling, and kind of making what works for you work for you.
Awesome. That's a good, interesting stat to know. just the percentage wise to think about even within your space too. Um, do you have a cover crop? What cover crop do you recommend while planting native plants for a whole lot, like a residential new construction type space? Do you have any recommendations for that?
I personally do not know much about that process, but great question. I can definitely, grab your email or email Alyssa, and I can get that. I can look up some suggestions there. It really depends on where you live, and what we're trying to accomplish. But like I've read about a number of them, but off the top of my head, I'm definitely not gonna say anything correct here.
Understood. Understood. We'll look into some resources for you for that one. Um, I mean, this is just a follow-up from kind of that Northeast Oklahoma, and maybe this is just a fun general question. Anyways, a broad question. Do you have any favorite plants you recommend for more formal beds in full sun and average moisture? Any
Well,
favorite plants?
oh gosh, I'm over here in Illinois, so we're far away as terms of ecoregions go. And I'm drawing a blank on like literally any Oklahoma plant. I'm a big fan of grasses. Like I think I totally like many newer gardeners, right? I just was like, flowers, cool, add the flowers. But over the last since I started working at Wild Ones and learning a lot more about native gardening, like yeah, like grasses are really key. So right now I'm like a huge fan of prairie dropseed, for example, because I think it looks pretty. It's a nice way to fill out the beds. As you saw, I just put in like 40 plugs of it in my front yard. And I think it has a really nice formal look. I think that the fountain shape and the way that it kind of like softens the edges of our beds and kind of fills that ground cover niche while also providing like height and density is helpful. So like that's kind of my fallback, but I know that out in Oklahoma and like that section of the country, there's a ton of really fun grasses that could be used in that area.
Awesome. Um, in regarding the dieback of plants in late fall, I know it's best to leave them for the birds and winter interest, but would it be okay to cut it and just leave it in a pile?
I mean, it's a mixture of what works for you and what works for your yard and your relationship, like, right? So, best practice is to leave everything standing because that is what would happen in a natural ecosystem. And as much as we can mimic what's going on in natural ecosystems, the better our landscapes are going to be. So when plants go dormant over like for winter, I do see a lot of recommendations that folks can cut. I think, what is it, between 12 and 15 inches? So like a lot of folks will go in and cut all of that and just leave the stems there. Um, and then, I mean, and then so it's like the stage, right? So best practice, if you can leave them upright. Second best is if maybe you cut them at different heights, a couple different heights, and always, as much as possible, like compost on site. Leave anything that you cut or remove from your gardens on in the garden bed, ideally, or like somewhere in your yard. And there's a lot of solutions for dealing with like stems and leaves and sticks. But yes, I mean, you're welcome to do that if, for example, like you have neighbors that are like, well, that looks ugly in winter, but I actually think native gardens in winter are some of the more sculptural and pretty things to look at. I love seeing like the high plants with snow dripping off of them.
That's a great question. Here's another one that's kind of not in line, just in line with like how we're getting our landscapes out there. What is the best way to kill the lawn slash grass when planting a native garden?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways you can kind of kill off grass. Here we recommend, for the most part, either solarization, like it's probably one of the easiest ways to do it, and I'll probably just stick with that because like some folks can remove the top layer of grasses, but again, that is disturbing soil. It's opening up the seed bank for who knows what might come out underneath that grass. And so for the most part, like solarization or like suffocating with cardboard are the two probably easiest, most accessible ways to start your native garden. And as you could see in the picture that I shared, like that's what I did with my little garden in the front, is I just threw cardboard down. And I was too impatient to wait, so I just went ahead and didn't wait till the grass died. So I'll pay for that later.
That's that's a great answer. Do you happen to know of grant resources for developing educational and community native habitat gardening. They have Doug Talmy coming to their community and looking for grant money to pay for this as well as their pollinator week events and garden building and whatever. So any good grant resources potentially that you are aware of?
Yeah, great question. Good luck. How exciting to have Dr. Talmy come on site. Well, yeah, hard time to be looking for grant funds. Wild Ones does have our Seeds for Education grant program, which is up to $500 to support educational garden implementation, specifically, geared towards youth, so like K through 12. Um, and there are, so I clicked, like, past a quick Google. I don't have anything off the top of my head about what might work for you personally, but I know that locally you're going to be able to find a lot more resources than I might know of nationally. And so, like, looking at your local chamber of commerce or city and municipalities often have funding for supporting education, youth education, and climate resilient landscaping choices. So I would start local and then kind of branch out from there.
And off the top of my head too, just
Yeah.
thinking for like local resources, if you have any native plant societies or you have, master gardeners, master naturalists in your area, sometimes garden clubs, they might have local grants that could be useful to help try and fund some of those as well. And I believe on the MJV website, if I'm
There's,
remembering correctly, we do have a local like grants list that you might be able to access and find as well. So we'll try and add that to the resources, if I'm remembering correctly from the Monarch joint venture website also.
yeah.
Looks like we have time for like maybe one or two more questions. So let me see here. Oh, this is a good one. How do you keep common milkweed in bounds in a formal landscape? Mine pops up all over.
I actually love that. So I like hot take here. I think it's hilarious and amazing when you just have like this 8 foot tall milkweed spring up in the middle of your garden bed. Like I don't know. I just think that's so neat. It's just nature in action. Um, but I guess realistic if you don't love that, gosh, our native gardens are not maintenance free, right? They're low maintenance, not no maintenance. And so no matter what, we're living in this man-made environment. And so you're going to have to go in your garden, you're going to have to weed, native plants. Some of the species in those designs themselves I just showed you are pretty quick spreading. And so, if you want your garden to look very curated and aesthetic and traditional, you're going to need to go in, you're going to have to weed out, native plants, including milkweed. And so, yeah, just keeping an eye on your garden, and there are a lot of good book resources for identifying native plants as like little tiny seedlings, because they all kind of start to look the same when they're first growing. And so getting acquainted with the species you have in your garden and the species that are found in your local area will help you identify plants off the bat. So if you have somebody growing in the wrong place, my suggestion is you pot it up and give it to a neighbor.
It's a great one. And common milkweed's just one of those ones that grows by rhizomes, so it'll just pop up elsewhere. So yeah, keeping an eye on it. I have the same thing happen to me with a nice little pops out in the middle of the yard. So that's always fun. Well, that's kind of all the time we have today for questions. We do have a small list of questions that we didn't get to today. Again, don't worry. We will send these over to Sarah. We'll make sure that we get you the resources that she has already put together for you guys. Make sure to check out your local Wild Ones chapters as well. I'm sure there's resources in her sheets for you. But again, just thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your knowledge, sharing about Wild Ones. Thank you all for joining us and participating. We would love for you to fill out our feedback form. Jenna is going to put that in the chat, so please take a moment to do that as well. Helps us inform our webinar series as we think about speakers in the upcoming year. And as a reminder, we hope to see you for our next webinar. It is going to be on a different Tuesday with the holiday, I believe. So this will be on Tuesday, November 18th. It is called Community Driven Conservation: How Alternary AC Protects Monarch Habitats and Empowers Rural Communities. We'll be joined by Karen Vega and Guadalupe Del Rio. And we hope to see you next month. Otherwise, thank you so much and have a fantastic day. And thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.